thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar, Council Elections 101. Learn about becoming an OAA Councillor. My name is Felix and I'm the webinar coordinator at the Continuing Education Department at the OAA. We will begin today's webinar by acknowledging the land on which we are meeting and calling in from today. For millennia, the place we call Ontario has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples and nations who have been stewards of the land and are deeply connected to its rich cultural and natural landscape. We would like to invite you in a moment of reflection to acknowledge our shared responsibility to address past and present injustices and provide space for Indigenous knowledge and worldviews to shape the architectural landscape of Turtle Island. Before we commence, I would like to share some important information to ensure an effective and professional webinar experience. Firstly, please be informed that this session is being recorded for quality and educational purposes. In order to maintain a stable internet connection, we have muted all participant microphones and disabled video feeds. We highly encourage engagement through our Q&A window. Feel free to submit any questions you may have for our speakers. These will be addressed in the designated Q&A period at the end of the presentation. Kindly note, the chat function will be deactivated following this introduction. For those seeking continuing education learning hours, please note that attendance is crucial. A minimum of 80% attendance is required for these hours to be accredited to your transcript. And lastly, please note that the presenters do not provide insurance, legal, or practice advice, and the OAA does not bear responsibility for errors or omissions in discussions during the webinar. For accessibility, we provide automated closed captioning service available in multiple languages to accommodate the need of our diverse audience. But now, I'm excited to introduce our panelist for today's session. Kristi, I'm passing it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Felix, for opening our session today. I hope everybody can hear me okay. And thank you for dealing with those housekeeping matters. Sincere welcome to everyone who has joined us today. My name is Kristi Doyle, and I'm the OAA's Executive Director. We are very pleased with the response for today's session. It is my great pleasure to introduce our panel for today's webinar. Settimo Vilardi is a principal with Windsor-based Archon Architects. Set has been a councillor since January 2020 and is currently serving his second year as president of the OAA's Governing Council. Susan Speigel is a Toronto-based architect with more than 30 years of experience in a number of major cities globally. Susan has held numerous volunteer positions with the OAA, including Council President in 2021 and 2022. Susan currently serves as an OAA Vice President. Lara McKendrick is an Ottawa-based architect as well as an Alberta architect. Lara joined Council in 2021 and currently serves as a Vice President. Lara is also chair of the OAA Building Committee. Toon Dreessen leads the Ottawa firm Architects DCA. He has been volunteering with the OAA for over 18 years. Toon spent 6 years on Council, where he was president in 2015 and 2016. So welcome to our panelists. Today's session is going to be casual and conversational. I will be moderating a discussion that is prompted through a series of questions for our panelists. And the intent of this session is to provide insight, education, and awareness with respect to the role of a councillor from the perspective of your peers who have served on Council. We will leave some time for questions from the audience. And as Felix noted, please ask your questions through the Q&A function. And given the purpose of this session, we would ask everyone to keep their questions focused on today's topic. We're not going to be delving into specific initiatives of the OAA or council or policy or regulatory matters. We're going to stick within our topic. We will wrap up by 2 p.m. Before I jump in, I do want to take just a moment to review the mandate of the OAA and also the roles and responsibilities of members of the Governing Council. I think this is good. It'll set the stage and give us some perspective. And so while it may not necessarily seem like it, I do want to point out that self-regulation is in fact a privilege that's given to a profession through legislation. It means that there's a serious public interest component to the work that you do. And therefore the government needs, or the public needs to be protected and to ensure its safety through legislation. In many instances, the government regulates directly to protect the public. But through self-regulating professions, the government has entrusted that very profession itself to govern themselves in order that the public will be protected. And this is achieved through the Architects Act, which is a statute of the Government of Ontario. The OAA itself is a not-for-profit corporation established under the Architects Act, and the elected councillors act as directors of the corporation, and they form the governing council. And as is the case for all not-for-profits, the role of council, or often called the board, is to fulfill its fiduciary duties. Additional roles and responsibilities are established through the OAA bylaws. And the intent of this session is not to review these specific roles in detail. However, it is important to understand that the members of council do not represent a constituency of members once they're elected. Their role is to serve the public interest, to further the legislative mandate of the OAA, and support and further the achievement of the strategic plan. So with that said, let's move into the panel discussion. And again, I'll just reiterate, this is intended to be a positive discussion. Of course, it's an effort to encourage participation through education and information from the perspective of architects who have served on council. We really do hope that this session will deepen your understanding and you will take away perhaps a few interesting and inspiring thoughts from your peers. And of course, you will consider running for council sometime in the future. So I'm going to jump right into the questions, and I'm just going to switch my screens around here so that I can see everybody properly. And so I'm going to jump into questions. And this first question is a question that I'm going to pose to the entire panel, and then I'll just ask you guys to respond accordingly. And so I think it's important just to set the stage. Can you each tell me, why did you run for council? What was your motivation, your goals and objectives? So maybe I'll start with Lara. Why don't you go first?
Okay, thanks, Kristi. Yeah, I ran for council because I wanted to contribute. I wanted to give back to our profession, and I wanted to learn. It might sound a little trite, but that's really what it was all about. Early in my career, the architect I worked for at that time was chair of the local society here in Ottawa, and she encouraged me to volunteer and be engaged in the culture of the profession. So I slid right into local society volunteering out of university, and I enjoyed it very much. So this early engagement with volunteering on a local society events was a lot of fun, and I got to know some local practices and architects who were not my immediate peers. And then for many years, my volunteering efforts were all about my sporty pastimes. And I kind of stepped away from the profession's volunteer hours, doing stuff with Race Weekend and Ski Patrol for many, many years.
Great.
Then when I started my own practice, my focus and hours shifted again. So that's when I really wanted to fully understand what it means to be a self-governing profession. Because as the owner of a practice, it truly hit home that there's more at stake when one's name is on the door and at the bottom of every contract. So that's really my motivation.
Thanks, Laura. Maybe I'll scoot over to you, Susan.
I never put myself on mute, and of course I did today. Well, I never thought the OAA was a scary place like many people did upon graduation. My father-in-law was a president in the 70s, and he just had great stories about being the president. But I had a very hard time trying to understand what the OAA was as, a young, not quite architect. So after architecture school, I went on to committees. I guess I was what we then now call the intern. And I worked on the first conference, try and figure out how to keep current. And I also was part of the group that was contemplating licensed technologists and reviewing their exams, which I felt like, how am I reviewing their exams? But anyway, I was an intern and that's what I did. So if there's any interns on the call, there's definitely a place for you. I started my, so I, like Laura, I started my own practice and then I had children and I left the OAA work. But then many years later, I came back, and that was about 6 years ago. And I'm not sure I actually decided to run, to be frank. I was at the REIC conference where in St. John, New Brunswick, where I became a fellow. And I had some wonderful conversations with the president, then to be president, Katie Curtin. And she was I was so inspired by her enthusiasm for both the OAA and BEAT, which was just getting going, building equity in architecture Toronto, and how they were all so active. I realized that just being in practice even though I was also teaching, I didn't feel I had a big enough view of the larger community and the culture of architecture, which is what I am very interested in. And I had become myopic. So I told Katie I would think about, running for council. I went on the website and I realized no one was running in Toronto, which was shocking to me. And I thought, all right, I have to do this. I mean, I feel obliged. So I did. I committed myself to do something for and with the OAA. And in retrospect, well, it was kind of by happen chance, a little bit, but in retrospect, it was very different than what I had originally imagined, but so much more powerful. In addition to the wonderful challenges, there's a great joy in being at the table with 5, 10, 15, 25, 50 wonderful staff and councillors who are all smart, have great ideas, and do their homework. So I'm very happy I took the chance. So.
Thank you, Susan. Seth, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I mean, similar to some of the things that Lara and Susan said, I wanted to contribute as well. But for me, it was a lot about sort of natural evolution in a way. When I was a student at the University of Toronto, I was the president of our student union back then. When I was in Windsor, I was encouraged to be on the local society and eventually became treasurer and chair for that society. During that time as chair, I was able to participate in a lot of OAA events that took me to Toronto and interact with a lot of other society chairs and, of course, council back then. And in fact, Toon was president at the time and was also very encouraging for me to saw, people, see something in other people that entitles them to sort of look a little bit further than maybe their own local societies. And that's kind of my process. Is it was really just an evolution of my role, with architecture in student societies, then as a member of a local society and as taking on a leadership role here, connecting with OAA council and staff. And like Susan mentioned, a lot of great staff, a lot of really positive encouragement. People really seemed very connected to the organization. And, for me also, I wanted to kind of better understand the role of an architect in our society and the importance that we play and how that all came about, and just understanding the very important role of self-governance, and which I think, like Kristi mentioned, is a really important aspect that not a lot of people understand, that, we're really have a great responsibility here, but are also, have the great resource to regulate our own profession. A lot of people don't have that ability, and so I think that's sort of an important role. And from then I really felt that I could contribute to the policy making, to the governance of the association, understanding what individuals are doing across the province. I liked being a part of the profession, the greater profession, not just here in my little corner in Windsor, but the entire province. So obviously being on council allowed me to connect with people all over the province, which was great. In fact, all over the country, because my role as president also allows me to communicate and connect with people in other regulatory organizations across Canada, because we meet regularly with other bodies similar to ourselves in other provinces. And so it's really been a great way to kind of connect provincially and nationally. And I haven't gotten a chance to connect internationally yet, but through our role with the regulatory organizations of architecture in Canada, ROAC, we do have these agreements, international agreements with other organizations, and I am getting a little bit of my feet wet. I know Kristi's involved quite specifically in these trinational agreements, and so it's really been really great for me to do that. And so I think natural evolution, just a connection, contribution, all those things.
Okay, thanks, Seth. Toon, how about you?
Well, when I graduated, I really realized fairly quickly that as soon as I was licensed, about 5 years afterwards, that there was a lot of stuff I didn't know, and I had an opportunity to volunteer with the OAA's practice committee, and I really learned a lot sitting at a table, with people who were theoretically my peers, but I felt very much like the new kid on the block, and I guess in a sense I was. And that really opened my eyes a lot to the things that the OAA does and the important things that the OAA does and can do. And that, after 6 years, springboarded me into running for council, where I really got a chance to sort of see much more of how council operates, how the OAA operates, what it's responsible for. And I learned so much in that time that it made me really want to continue to serve, made me want to serve as president, to kind of help do the things that I wanted to see the OAA accomplish. And at the time, some of the focus was on, advocacy roles, and I really enjoyed that. And to this day, continue to serve on OAA councils and committee and now OAA committees to enjoy that, because I feel like it really gives me a chance to give something back to the profession and help steer it in the direction that it needs to go.
Great. Thanks, Toon. And I think the importance of that question is really, hopefully everybody will see that there's such a varied set of experiences or reasons why people run from council, and there is no one right answer about what that motivation should or can be. There's a lot of different. I will say, and I heard all of you talking about this and saying, once you were on council, understanding what the regulator is, I think that's, we can touch on a little bit later, but one of the key things is to understand, our mandate is the public interest. So that's often sort of that, I'll call it perhaps lack of sort of communication or maybe misunderstanding about what the role of the OAA is, but it truly is the regulator. But self-regulating is certainly a privilege. I'm going to move to the next question. And this is, I'm going to ask Lara and Toon this question specifically. And it's a good segue into this, because one of the reasons, or perhaps one of the discussions I've had previously with members about sort of understanding what level of experience or background they need to have or should have to come on council. So I think through this question, actually the audience will understand how that again is probably varied. But so I'm going to ask you this question: how important do you think it is to have previous experience with the OAA before joining council? And is there anything in your mind that stands out in particular that prepared yourself? And obviously I'm encouraging everybody to speak in honesty and with openness about whether they think it's important that you have experience or not, and what kind of experience, and that really is focused on experience with the OAA, I'll say in particular. So I'm gonna ask Seth, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I thought a lot about this question, because I know you provided some of these tests in advance, and I do think that having some experience on a committee, certainly like myself, having sat on the local society as chair and as executive, did provide me with a really good base to join council. I think that ability to sit as chair or on the executive and having that interaction with the OAA at different times throughout the year, with society chair meetings, attending a conference and being involved in some events, World Architecture Day in Toronto, were all sort of important, I think, elements of gaining sort of experience to sit on council. The challenge with council is that it seems like you're on there for a long time, but years go by and meetings go by very quickly. And so you want to really be able to be at a meeting and start contributing right away. And you don't really want to sit at the back bench for too many meetings, just sort of listening in and feeling like you have to learn. I mean, certainly I will agree. I'm always learning, and we always need to be learning. And I think part of why we join council is also to gain greater insight, but also the intent is to contribute to the council table, contribute to discussions, and feel you have the confidence, either from experience on other committees or societies with the OAA, or even just other organizations outside, to be able to be there and be contributing to the discussions. Because I think that's a really important aspect. A lot of people, I think, join council and feel this kind of imposter syndrome, like, why am I at this table? I mean, Toon mentioned it. I certainly felt it myself with a bunch of very smart people sitting around the table. But I quickly learned that the intent was for me to contribute, was for me to take part in the discussion and provide my thoughts, and also to listen to other people's thoughts. And it's not necessarily a problem that if you're listening to other people, you're forming your own decisions as well, but you're hearing from your colleagues and able to speak again at the end of a vote, in a unanimous way. And that doesn't always happen, but certainly we are on council on the same page quite a bit of time, because we do sort of listen and interact and talk and discuss a lot of items. So I think, I feel like I don't want to lose the train of thought too much, but part of me says that I do think having some experience on some committees or around your local societies was important. Obviously, participating in OAA events like conference and those sessions I think does help. And so again, my thoughts would be, you don't necessarily have to have a ton of experience, but I think enough that you feel like you have a comfort level to take part and contribute, certainly around the council table and at other committees that you'll be a part of while you're on council.
Okay. Thanks, Ed. Laura, what's your perspective on this?
So I'll take the opposite tact. I think you don't need any experience at all. And I don't think you should be hung up about that, because in fact, I was a little bit hung up about it. And I ran into an old boss at a conference event, and I said, oh, you know, maybe I'll do a committee first. And he was adamant. He said, no, run for council. And I think the most important thing is that you're willing to bring your A game and to spend the time you need to be prepared for each meeting and be willing to work together. Just like Seth says, we're working together with fellow councillors and the committee members of the committees that you serve on. And they're all really knowledgeable. And it's also important to be willing to ask questions when you're uncertain, and that because there are items before council that started before you got there, and that will always be the case when you first start something with an organization that's ongoing. But the staff at the OAA are excellent, and the other members of the council are very helpful, and they can bring you up to speed quickly and fill in the blanks, because self-governance is a team effort. So you're part of a team. And as both Seth and Kristi says, it's really important to keep in mind that the OAA is our regulatory body and is not an advocacy group for architects. And any education and public outreach done by the OAA is done as part of the OAA's secondary mandate set out in legislation, the Architects Act, to further public appreciation of architecture and the allied arts and sciences in support of our first mandate, which is to protect the public, not to further the interests of other architects. So it can sometimes feel like a bit of a fine line. And if you want to advocate, there are other avenues and groups for that. So that's sort of my two thoughts on that.
Thanks, Laura. Toon, I'll let you jump in on your perspective on experience.
I mean, I'm kind of falling in between Laura and Seth. You know, I thought it was really helpful to have experience, but I also saw a lot of people coming to the council table who didn't have experience. And one of the benefits, I think, of the way council is structured is that it's not, you know, a wholesale new group of, you know, 25 people or 20 people every year. There's sort of a rotating cycle, and people coming in and then people renewing. So there's always sort of, you know, history and memory and ideas, and that you can learn from. And so being on council is a whole different game from being on a committee. A committee is sort of focused on a specific issue like practice or experience requirements. And so you might get a lot of experience in that, but it may not be the same as being on council where you're covering a much broader range of topics. So, you know, don't let, like Laura said, don't let inexperience on council stop you from running for council, but also don't let inexperience or hesitancy on a committee prevent you from running for volunteering for a committee, or being on a committee and having served you know, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever on a committee. You know, don't let that stop you from running for council because you've had that experience. It's a really broad experience that gives you a chance to sort of see all the different aspects of how council operates and the role and purpose of self-regulating profession.
Great. Thanks, Toon. And I think that was a great perspective from, you know, from A to Z, because on one hand, yeah, experience probably is useful, but it's not necessary. So hopefully that's kind of a takeaway for everybody in the audience. If you're thinking about it and you don't have experience with the OAA, it does not preclude you from running for council. So I'm going to move to the next question. And this is actually a question for Susan. And Susan, I'm going to ask this because you've had such a broad sort of, I'll call it career with the OAA, but can you talk a little bit about the different opportunities that arise for members of council in terms of activities or initiatives that you might become an extension of your involvement as council?
Yes, I'd love to. And I hope I don't go over on this. Somebody will have to wave at me and tell me to be quiet. But I think it's interesting that each of us has talked about our understanding of regulation. And in the middle of this, I am going to talk about mine as well. I've always seen architecture as this very big umbrella under which you can explore many different aspects of architectural culture, like to name a few: education, practice, materiality, theory, travel, sustainability, climate issues, psychology, the spirit of place, place to change, make the world a better place. I don't know an architect who hasn't felt that at least some point in their career. And I participated in all of those items listed above while being on council at the OAA. And though I might have started my life as an activist, I've seen the power of regulatory and policy development from the top down. Being on council also allows us to affect the world. It's just a different form of effect.
Mhm.
So this is when I want to take a little step back and talk about from the opportunities to talk about the struggle of the importance of the OAA. And in the middle of my presidency, we took on, because it was in COVID, we thought we would take on this challenge of digging very deep into developing a 5-year strategic plan,
Mhm.
to deepen our understanding of what was becoming very difficult. Like, what was the difference between regulatory and advocacy, and our primary object and our secondary object? And so we dug really deep about this and tried to understand how we were going to continue to deliver our regulatory objects in an evolved way. And it's interesting because in any discussion with an architect, everybody thinks we're in advocacy. It's kind of crazy. I mean, people who've been in practice 30 years come up to me and goes, "Why aren't you doing this?" It's because we're not an advocate. That's not our role. So I think it's very interesting to understand what that is. So in our strategic plan, we refined our structure to understand what protects the public interest, which is in a way protects the interest from architects. I mean, if you want to be kind of cartoonish about it. And secondarily, develops an educational platform to ensure that all architects have the best practice skills and to communicate and educate the culture of architecture to the public. I mean, what could be better than that? So with our strategic plan clarified and all of us in our lanes, that we know what to do, we know what we're not to do, we now can dovetail back to the opportunities. Because what happens with that is once we have clarity in our lanes and we know what we do, we can fund other people to do the work that we are not supposed to be doing, but are part of our education. So for example, on just this morning, we got this wonderful letter from McEwen University, that's Laurentian School, obviously everybody knows that, about an architecture summer camp that was run for children. And the children loved it and they felt great about architecture. They wanted to be architects, they didn't, but they felt they really learned something. It was very moving and gratifying. And we would never deliver this ever, but we provided them support. We dovetailed with them to do the things that we don't do. And so that's a very wonderful part of being on the OAA. And I want to just talk about the initiatives that I've worked on that appeal to my global perspective. John Stevenson, as he was leaving the presidency, initiated a reconciliation big think. And I was tasked with following through on developing the understanding of what we could do on the OAA to promote meaningful reconciliation, partnering with the 15 Indigenous architects as subject matter experts. I mean, what an honor, honestly. To work with that group and to think that we could actually do something important, which, you know, made us understand how we had to do our land acknowledgement and all, you know, it's a primary lens in all the work that we do at the OAA now. We also did a long-term care study during COVID. You know, what better time to do it? U of T was our partner. We had an architect doctor. Can you imagine being those two things together? And we got to share our committee's recommendation with MPPs. Well, that felt very empowering. And we're also a partner in a 5-year ongoing national research project, Quality in the Built Environment, with 14 architecture universities, 3 levels of government, and 60 citizen groups. And we hope to come up with something pretty fabulous, but that's across the country, working with every university and every regulatory body. And we also participate in joint industry groups that are fascinating to hear other equally rigorous industries' challenges and trying to find ways to work together to support each other. I mean, I just remember when the concrete and the pipes people, the head of those, whatever they are, companies, industries, their own regulatory bodies said, we're not laying any concrete or any pipe, so you're not going to see any work for the next 3 years. That was shocking. And it was, you know, in the beginning of the slowdown. And then I've been the chair of PACT, which is the OAA policy committee that works closely with the Ontario MPPs, making recommendations to the government. So although we aren't an advocate body, we influence both architects and the public about the importance and culture of architecture through our education committees, communication, policy committees. So get get into council, get on committees outside your normal perspective and see the breadth of the work that the OAA curates and produces. It's pretty awesome.
Great.
So-
Thank you, Susan. That was very succinct. And I think, you know, you make a good point about, yes, the strategic plan. We've talked a lot about that over the past 3 or 4 years. It's become, you know, the foundation for what we do. It's provided focus and really in the realm of good governance been a really important tool. But you're right, we always have that tension between thinking that, you know, we are the regulator, but the tension between that and an advocacy body. And as you said it, we've been really clear, we're not the advocacy body for the profession, but we do support, and it's either through in-kind support or funding, that there are other groups out there that are doing this work that we think is important and that may support our mandates. So that's how we can do that, because certainly we don't have the resources necessarily to do that in-house, or it's just not in our wheelhouse. So that's a great summary. I'm going to switch to another question, and I'm going to point this question to Lara and Seth. And it's probably one that's on everybody's mind whenever they're thinking about council, even committee work. But we'll focus on council. And this is a question I know that comes up. It's about commitment, time commitment. So can you provide a little bit of insight from your own perspective as to the time commitment that one might expect? And I know both of you have had different time and roles on council. So maybe Lara, you could talk about it just sort of from, if you were a new councillor, what does your time commitment look like? Seth, you might talk about it a little bit more from the perspective of somebody who's been on council for a number of years, or maybe in your second term, and or you might involve yourself in executive. So Lara, I'll ask you to go first.
Okay, thanks, Kristi. Yeah, I give this quite a bit of thought because it's like been a while since I started, and it's some things have changed a little bit. The things have been streamlined with implementation of the strategic plan, but for the better. And so I would say that as a new councillor, well, first of all, you'll be expected to attend all council meetings, including the council an OAA senior staff planning session early in the year. And then you're going to serve on a committee for certain and attend the conference and the AGM, which as a result of member preference is now virtual rather than at conference. Most committee meetings are now done using Zoom, so there's less travel to Toronto, and that makes it very manageable. And also, if something does come up and you can't travel to the OAA building for a council meeting, Zoom is possible, but all councillors get more out of it and contribute more fully and easily when attending council's sessions in person. So I would emphasize that in person does help, particularly when you're new and with a such. So this amounts to 7 council meetings, 1 planning session, and 3 to 6 committee meetings, depending on the committee. And then as a result of internal OAA workflow, on generally ongoing items and the necessary process for specific projects, the commitment for a regular member of council equates to roughly 2 days per month. Some months may be a little bit more and others less. And there's usually a break in June, July, and then again in October. So there's a rhythm to it. And once one gets into the flow of it, it's very manageable. And there would be your prep for the meeting with reading, and then attending the meetings, and then the committee work. There's usually a little bit before and then a little bit of wrap up, what you normally do when you're prepping for something.
Okay. Thanks, Lara. Seth, your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Laura kind of hit it a little bit on the head for me, and as a continuing councillors, I think you do tend to develop a rhythm of when, you know, the council information is coming out. And I think that would be one suggestion I would have, is that, you know, be aware of the council meeting schedule, and be aware that that week before council, you're going to get a package of information, and be aware that you should allow yourself some time, uninterrupted time to review that. Not, you know, it depends how you work. If you're, you know, an after 5 o'clock worker, or, you know, put it off to the weekend worker, whatever that might be. make sure that you leave enough time. Don't pack and stack your meetings so that, days before council, you're so jammed that you can't. So I think an awareness of your schedule and just being well organized is really important. And I think if you can do that, you're way ahead of the game. I think the other part, as far as time commitment, is I think we've mentioned the OA staff and Kristi specifically, is that they're very respectful of the time. They know that you are a full-time architect and run a business, and they do their best to schedule meetings and other events so that they either coincide with council meetings or they use your time is being used wisely if you have to come to Toronto. So I think that's one thing that you can rely on too, is that you're not just out for yourself. I mean, people are looking out for you too on the OAA side to make your life as easy as possible. They realize that your first priority is in your profession, and not that the OAA is a second priority, but certainly that this is for the most part volunteer. And so again, they're very respectful of organizing your time and using your time wisely and prepping you when you need to and providing you with the right information when you need to. Certainly being available to answer questions. So again, if you feel like there's something you're not understanding and that you need some additional information, Kristi and Tina and a lot of the staff at the OAA are always very helpful in providing you with additional information or direction if you need it. So again, I would say, I don't know that I'd put a number on it. It's been challenging for me only because the last couple of years I've been president, so it's a little bit more demanding. But I can honestly say it's been quite good. I mean, I've been able to run my practice here. Like Kristi mentioned, I'm a principal here in Windsor, and we are working, practice. I'm on site. I do contract administration. I do design work. Our office isn't like a huge office. I'm not just an administrator. And so I've been able to manage. Obviously, some weeks are tougher than others. But I think I'm pretty well organized. And I think with that aspect in particular, I think, in my experience a little bit too, being on our local society kind of helped as well. So I think, Lara was very eloquent in putting some time to it. And I think, that's a good, 2 to 3 days a week for sure. Some months are a little bit busier. Some are much less. But I think it is very manageable. And I think if you value the profession, value the state of the profession, value the future of the profession, I think it behooves you to get on council or be part of the organization and really contribute so that we can continue to try to make this a very strong profession and continue to be self-governing and also as well sort of in some respects, continue with our mandate to protect the public interest. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Seth and Lara. I just wanted to add something, and I thank you, Lara, for pointing out the Zoom aspect. And I know that seems very just a normal thing now, but in fact, prior to us having to deal with the pandemic, we had made moves to create an environment where we would be able to bring members in to participate in meetings through Zoom or whatever the application was. So it is a tactic that we're taking out because we really understand the time commitment for this and to be able to participate in shorter meetings through Zoom. So that's always an option. I also wanted to point something out because you talked about staff, and thank you. I agree. We have a very capable staff at the OAA. But one thing to remember too is that the board, and this I say this because some people in the audience may have worked on a board before or a council, and there's a difference between a working board, which tend to actually do a lot of work, and it is very labor intensive from that perspective. Through the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum is that you have strictly a governance or policy board where they make the policy decisions, and that's the way the OAA operates. So the governing council is the policy maker, they're the decision maker, but you have a team and a staff that basically moves forward with that direction and implements those decisions. So that, the heavy lifting and that work gets done through staff. Again, council are the decision makers, excuse me. So we often use this phrase where we say staff are the rowers of the boat and the council steers the vote. So that's something that we usually say. But I think, bigger picture too is just to understand that everybody on this screen right now has a practice. And so they've been involved in council and successfully run their own practice. So that's important to remember. But it is a time commitment, and you have to make sure that you're aware of that and be able to commit the time. And, I have, in talking to other members, there's points in their life when it might be better than other points in terms of when you can make that commitment. So it's something that you might want to think about. And maybe it's not now, but maybe it's in 5 years. So I'm going to move to the next question. And this is for everybody. I'm going to start with Toon. And it's almost like a bit of a rapid fire, but what is your best advice for a member who is thinking about running? So this isn't once you get on council. This is if there's people sitting in the audience right now and they're thinking about running, is there something that you would give them as advice, just given your experience for running for council and then being on council? What comes to mind?
I would say that make sure that you have a sense of curiosity and an interest in changing things. And I don't say that because you want to get on council and, change how the OAA does something, but that you want to see something happen. You want to see a positive change in the world, and that world that we operate in. You want to be part of something that is a change in, for example, how contracts are administered or delivered and how the OAA might write them or enforce them. Learning about that stuff and being curious to understand how council operates, what is within its mandate, what isn't. Don't jump to volunteer for council because you want to, bring on like a fee schedule or something, because it's not going to happen. Join council because you're curious to know how architecture is governed, how it is regulated in the province, and understand what sort of broadly the OAA can and can't do. And then join council to start affecting that kind of change that you want to see and continue to see, having a strong, stable profession.
Thanks, Toon. Susan.
And mine's a little bit shorter than that. I would say jump in and find your place. And maybe the way to do that is to get on our website. Now, people are always happy to complain about our website. Our website isn't a quick information fix. It's a very deep resource-laden it's a resource, and anything that you dig down on, you will see incredible riches. Like go into climate stability. We have a section on that. We've got a section on housing. You want to know about housing. Now, almost any issue that's really present in the architecture and the world today, we have a lot of resources. So I think when you understand the depth, and like somebody was saying, when you get on council, like I think it was set, you're not like, everybody's not new altogether. Like the website is almost like, like an AI person where it's got our history and our resources. And to me, that is, you don't have to be on council to do that. But once you get into the website and you really look at the riches, this is the place you want to be.
Good. Thanks, Susan. Lara.
I would say do it. Do it if you want to contribute to our profession on a fundamental basis, and then also learn about how important what we do is to be self-regulated. It's so important that we are engaged, and we need a really broad uptake on engagement. That's all I'd have to say.
Thanks, Lara. Seth.
Yeah, I would also say do it. I mean, if you're interested in the health of the profession, the ongoing future of the profession, if you're interested in the built environment and the quality of the built environment, if you want to affect change, like Toon said, this is the place to do it, right? Talking to people outside, complaining about stuff is not going to get stuff done. If you really want to make a difference, you got to get to the level of council, and that's where you're going to, be able to attempt to try to resolve some of these issues that we as architects complain about every day. And again, some things, we walk a fine line, certainly between regulation and advocacy, but there are a lot of outlets if you're interested. In fact, one of my keys to getting on council was, someone mentioned about fees, and I found an outlet in the fundamentals for running an architectural practice. And we have modules in that program that talks about contracts and setting up a firm and how to set reasonable fees. And so although the OAA is not providing that directly, we are contributing directly to the membership in that regard. And that was a stream that I found, and Toon talked about that. There are a lot of different streams, like Susan talked about, a lot of different streams that you can find your way in contributing in the ways that you want to do, but also around the council table. And that ability to do that in a huge cross section is also important, because I think again, we're architects are really multifaceted individuals. Our architectural or sort of our education is very multifaceted. And so I think we're good individuals to be able to understand the profession and how to govern it and all the aspects that go along with it. And so again, yeah, I would, if you're thinking about it, for sure, do it, because this is the place that's going to affect change. Complaining to your colleagues is not going to do anything. This is a place to do it.
Thanks, thanks everybody for that. And I'm not sure, Susan, or you mentioned the website, and I know that there was a couple of questions. I want to make sure that we have a little bit of time to do some questions. So I'm going to ask one more question after this of the panel, but the website is an important resource. And there was a question in the chat just about understanding what the OAA does, like what a regulator does. And I think there's a whole page obviously dedicated to the OAA as the regulator, about the OAA, and also understanding those mandatory, I'll call them elements, the legislated mandate that we have that includes things like, well, obviously licensing, consumer protection through public safety, but through complaints and discipline mechanisms. And I mean, I know that's not necessarily the fun side of it, but well, the licensing side is. But if you really want to understand a little bit more about the OAA, and again, if you're thinking about running, I encourage you, please do take a look through the website, because there is so much there. Okay, this is the last question, and we'll kind of do again a bit of a rapid fire, and then I want to make sure I've got time for a couple of questions. In a reflection, how do you feel about your time on council? What, if anything, do you think you've learned? Toon.
Through council, I learned to find a voice. I found a voice for advocacy for myself, for the profession, for education, for public awareness, that allows me to have a sidebar hobby, not quite a career, in writing and advocating for architecture, for the profession, for the value of design, and has given me the credibility as a member of council and past president to be able to speak for the importance architecture plays in our lives, and try to do something to make a lasting difference in the world. When I die, no one will remember that I was OAA president, but hopefully someone will remember some of the other positive changes that have happened in the world as a result.
Great. Lara.
That's great too. Very good. I like that. And yeah, I would say I had a very positive experience. I met wonderful people. I made new friends. I've learned a ton about so many different things. Like serving on complaints committee was a real eye-opener. Understanding where our fees go by being on budget committee, essentially come back to serving us is where they go. And that there's a deep expertise on staff at the OAA working on our behalf. And there's a real satisfaction in contributing. And that is what you could take back. What I took back from it is like, wow, I'm really part of a great organization. And part of it, like as Kristi said, the team that sets the direction and checks to make sure the direction is being taken, and be open. That was, kind of a great thing, was just open yourself up and listen to what else is going on and learn. And I loved it.
What have you learned?
What have I learned?
Oh,
Yeah.
Susan. Sorry, no, Susan. Sorry, I said Susan.
Oh.
Sorry.
It's an intellectual challenge. It's like getting registered all over again. You have to, like 800 questions have to be reviewed for the building code. I mean, it's rigorous, and I love that. And I also think that, If you work, you get all your points. You don't even have to do your points if you're worried about your time. You go to all your conferences, you get all your Con Ed, it magically happens and you don't even have to do anything. But I feel really lucky to be part of this big architectural and cultural think tank. That's
great. Set, last comment.
Yeah, no, I've learned that there is so much stuff that is going on in the background that we as architects, if we're not part of the OAA, would never see. I mean, there's so much, I mean, things, everybody's mentioned this, Susan's mentioned about all the policy work that's going on in the background, you know, the letters that are being, you know, the documents that are being reviewed from government, the letters that are going out to ministries, the work that's going on in the registrar's office with reviewing licenses and ensuring everybody's meeting quality standards, the work that's going on in the policy or the practice advisory team with the hotline, with contract preparation and creation, all the advice that we get from outside resources like legal, a ton of work that goes on in Con Ed, creating sessions, finding sessions, planning sessions, reviewing sessions. And, you know, it's just, there's so much going on in the background that I think that I, you know, obviously I knew to some extent, but it's really eye-opening so I've learned that there is a lot of work that's happening, it's supporting the profession, supporting what we do day in, day out. And so that was a big learning for me to understand just the vast of the volume. And I think Lara mentioned this too, you know, the money that it takes to do this and how this is kind of going back to all these areas in order to ensure both, you know, protect the public interest, but also support the profession and the members. And so that's what I've learned. And as far as, yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed my time on council. I've obviously been here for 6 years, 2 years as president. I've met amazing people. Certainly the ones on this call are the highlight, but there's a lot more people that I've met and having to interact with. And obviously very looking forward to going out to the societies in the next few months to do these visits, again, kind of hitting all parts of Ontario. And, you know, again, that's kind of special for me too, because I'm kind of outside the GTA in Windsor. And so again, if you're from the different parts of Ontario, I mean, the OAA is very supportive of having that level of interaction, whether you're from Ottawa or from Toronto or, you know, North Bay or wherever. I mean, don't let that stop you from contributing, because I think that's what makes the profession great, and that's what makes council great, and that's what, you know, really fuels the OAA and doing the work that they do so they can be representative of all the architects in Ontario.
Great, thanks, Seth. Okay, I want to make sure we've got about 10 minutes. I want to make sure that we cover some of these questions. There are a handful of questions. I'm going to, some of them are actually pretty, I think they might be rapid fire. I'm going to just start. There's a question here about whether or not there's ever a concern, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at my other screen. I'm not looking off into the distance. Is there ever a concern of conflict of interest when running for council while being a practicing architect? Does the self-regulating nature of the OAA negate this concern? And I think I might just jump in there because I think it's actually a pretty easy answer. No, the answer is not really. However, it does not negate anybody being on council. But what does happen is once you become a councillor, we do have a orientation. And I know there's another question about whether there's training or a course for councillors. There is a pretty detailed orientation that happens. We first do it for all the nominees, and it's a session that we ask everybody to come to. So to make sure you understand what the role is and sort of what what you're getting yourself into in fact. But in terms of the orientation, once you're on council, we have a very detailed discussion about conflict of interest. And there is a conflict of interest policy. And so on occasion, yes, a councillor may find themselves in a conflict, or real or perceived, in terms of a topic that we're talking about or the council is deciding on. So if that's the case, you just recuse yourself. So it does happen. It's not a bad thing to necessarily have a conflict of interest. What's important is that you declare it. So that's a good question. There was another question here about ambiguity between regulatory and advocacy. Seems confused by the term self-regulation, and I completely understand that. And I don't know, through this conversation, hopefully there's become a little bit of clarity for the group. in terms of that difference. And Susan, I think you talked really well about sort of what's happened over the course of the last 5 years. We've really focused on understanding and making and communicating our regulatory role. And so self-regulating means you're regulating, but it's in the public interest. So it's not an advocacy role. Within our legislation, we have secondary mandates that relate to our role in helping to foster or facilitate the public understanding and appreciation of architecture. But to be clear, that's not advocacy for the profession or for the individual architect. It's about architecture in general. So it's a bit of a subtle and perhaps, we could spend a day talking about the difference between that. But what we've also come to understand, and we're trying to also through council create a better understanding that there are other groups out there that are doing it. And I know that, members will often come to us and say, we think you should be doing this or you should be doing that. And it's really not in our mandate. But what we do, and we have discovered over time, and there's lots of links on our website, there are a ton of other groups that are doing this work. And so that's where that, focus should be. There are, I'll call them outlets or avenues or ways to move those initiatives forward. It's just not through the OAA. So that's something that we're really becoming more understanding of. And also the regulatory landscape in this country is changing. There's a lot of scrutiny around self-regulating. So hopefully that helps answer that a little bit further. There's a question about, once you're on council, can you end your term if he or she finds former councillors are not supporting his valuable new ideas? I'm not sure I completely understand that, but of course anybody can withdraw from council. I don't know if anybody wants to tackle that, because I think it's important that it's this the tension between, yes, we've talked about bringing new ideas, but there's also the fiduciary duty, the public interest, and really to support the plan going forward. So everybody brings their ideas, but council also works on a consensus basis. And I'll just tie in another question before I turn it over. There was another question about the difference between a councillor and a president. The president is the official spokesperson for the OAA, but they don't hold additional power. The governing council works as a unit. And once council makes a decision about something, it is incumbent upon the members of council to basically support that going forward. Does anybody else want to jump in on that? Toon, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add that, if your goal to get onto council is to start a revolution, then you've got the wrong set of goals. The goal of being on council is to understand how the council works and it's structured. And, if you're, things come up, right? My time on council, someone was ill and they had to resign because they just couldn't do the job anymore and they couldn't contribute. And then, either there's a by-election held, or someone gets appointed, or the seat just stays vacant if it's near the end of their term. And, these things happen, but you need to join council because you're prepared to serve out your 3-year term and potentially then run, I think it's up to 3 terms, I think you can hold in a row. And the goal is to be on council, and it's not to, bring forward, your idea. And if you don't get your idea heard, you're going to take your ball and go home. The goal is to bring your ideas to the table, hear them heard by the rest of council, and then council can make a decision that, that's a really great idea. We should do this, or we should, put this on the agenda, or we should follow this idea and we should proceed with it or not. And then you have to sort of, you have to recognize that your idea may not have the strength and support of council. And there are occasionally times, I remember in my times, we were voting on the renovations to the building. And that was a contentious, challenging thing that really needed a lot of careful thought. We had special council meetings, special debates. And, not every meeting there was consensus on something. And when there is a vote, on something, you can register that you oppose the vote, and you can ensure that your name is with it, at that vote of opposition, so that your name is associated with that, because that's what matters to you. But as Kristi said, it's a consensus-based model. So the idea is that there's a strategic plan, there's a goal, council moves in a certain direction that steers the OAA and proceeds in a certain path within its regulatory boundaries.
Great, thanks, Toon. There's a question here about contacting council. Certainly, you can contact council directly. There's an email address, it's council@oaa.on.ca, and there's also a president's mailbox. So if you have questions that you want to pose directly to council, you can do it through those websites, and they are through those emails which are on the website. There's a question about whether the minister is part of the council. And when I say minister, it's within the Architects Act. We report to the minister, sorry, to the Attorney General. He is the minister, he or she, or they are the minister responsible for the Architects Act. So we do meet with MAG, Ministry of the Attorney General, on a regular basis. So there isn't a set schedule, but certainly that connection is very strong between the ministry and the OAA.
Also have LGICs. Maybe you could just
Yeah.
describe what they are, who sit on
Yeah.
council.
Yeah, so we, on our council, we also have 3 to 5 lieutenant governor and council appointees, and these are public appointees. These are appointed by the government, and they're really there to ensure that to bring the public perspective to the council, but also to ensure that the OAA and we're basically fulfilling our fiduciary duty and our regulated scope under the Architects Act. So they are placed there on our council by the minister with approval of the lieutenant governor and council. There's a question about terms. So everybody will serve, councillors serve a 3-year term, and you actually can come back for 3 successive terms. So the most that a councillor can be on council is 9 years. I think I've answered that. We talked about a course. There's a question about a course, and I really think there isn't a course that we offer, hopefully through education opportunities like this. Also the session that we do when the nominations are accepted, but it actually happens before the nominations go live. We have that as an orientation, and then also during your council, when you become a new councillor, you will receive orientation. And the other thing that is important to remember is that we have ongoing training for councillor. As an element of good governance, we are continually offering training to council on good governance, but also the things that they would need to know in terms of their role as councillor. We talked about that. I know that the panelists, is there anything that the panelists would like to answer in particular? I realize that we're at 2 o'clock. There's a couple of questions that we haven't gotten to, which we can certainly.
I think if I could add that, I think that serving on council is really helpful about understanding the profession and helping to move the profession forward in a really positive way, to be responsible for ourselves. We always talk about, as we get licensed, how we're responsible for our stamp and responsible for our work. Being on council is really about continuing that sense of responsibility for the profession and for the governance of the profession to make the profession a better, stronger profession. We don't want to be regulated by government. We don't want to be unregulated. We have a privilege to serve in our role, and that takes years of education and internship. And being on council, I think, is really part of that continued service to make sure that we have a strong and viable profession for the future. And I think that, the work that Susan and Seth and Lara and myself have done with the incredible assistance of Kristi and incredible staff has been really instrumental in helping make the OAA a stronger profession today than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Great, thanks, Tom. There was a question here, and this is just sort of a process question. I want to make sure I cover this as well. Question about, budget, financial statements, expenses. I mean, yes, the council is ultimately responsible for the annual budget. So they do approve that each year, and also auditing receiving and approving the audited financial statements. And the oversight on a day-to-day basis is done through the senior vice president and treasurer, who is a member of council. So that is certainly something that happens. I think, in respect of everybody's time, I think that we should probably wrap up now. I hope that everyone enjoyed this session. It's the first time we've done it. Certainly taking some feedback from my own perspective and from the councillors. I'm going to ask Felix, actually, before I do that, I do want to just remind everybody, there will be an email sent on October 7th, which will be to all eligible participants regarding the election, so out to architect members. The nomination period will be open until October 28th. And nominees will be responsible for providing a text-based candidate statement. And it's really important that we talked about that, understanding the regulatory nature of the mandate and understanding, having a look at the website in terms of how you're going to run your candidate statement. Voting happens between November 11th and 25th, and then the registrar will announce the results on December 1st. The new term starts January 1st. So I want to thank our participants. Thank you very much to the panel. Felix, last closing remarks, house cleaning.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, for a great webinar today. And thanks also, everyone, for attending. As we conclude this webinar, I would like to draw to your attention to some announcements. The next webinar takes place in 2 weeks on September the 12th with the title Barrier-Free, Accessible or Inclusive Design. Become a Design for All Airline. The OAA will report your participation in this webinar to your transcript. Therefore, there's no need for individual reporting on your part. Additionally, all attendees will soon receive an email with a link to provide your feedback. Once again, thank you very much for your attendance and have a productive and pleasant remainder of your day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye.